Welcome back, everyone. Up next, we have Caleb Uzuegbunam, of Product at Kenley. He will share his knowledge on trustworthy AI workflows with this tutorial titled Beyond the Interface, Designing Trustworthy AI Workflows. Caleb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can I do that? Okay, see you. Right. Okay, so today we'll be talking about AI, building trustworthy AI workflows. And first of all, my name is, like Alex said, Caleb Uzuegbunam. I'm head of design and product at Kenley. Kenley is a YC-funded AI startup. We build tools for the professional services industry, focusing primarily on management consulting, strategy consulting clients. Everything we'll be talking about today will be from first-hand experiences, building trust into AI and non-deterministic systems on behalf of our customers. Right, so let's get into it. And just for context, we'll be talking about workflows not in an agentic workflow language. We know what agentic workflows are. They are series of configs that have been set as guides for an AI system to carry out actions until they get to a predetermined end. But in this case, we'll be talking about workflows more like an abstracted step-by-step process professionals use to do their work efficiently and consistently. Basically, what you would call an SOP, whether it's a minimal or a maximal SOP. An example of a workflow for, let's say, a consultant is to carry out research on the market on behalf of the client, prepare hypotheses, facilitate expert interviews to support and contradict said hypotheses, consolidate those learnings, and then provide the client with recommendations based on previously established benchmarks and other forms of analysis. This workflow can be broken down into smaller, minimal workflows, and to say we are designing or building Gen AI for consulting workflows is to actually work at that level of abstraction and plug in AI to a number of these smaller workflows that are kind of latticed together to carry out all kinds of work. So what does that mean? Let's keep going. In this session, I'll be introducing the topic, of course, but I'll also be talking about things like where trust breaks, designing for trust, making AI understandable, balancing automation and human oversight, scaling trust. Then why is this topic important? It's very important because when we're dealing with non-deterministic systems like current AI models, LLMs, non-predictability, things like inconsistent outputs, they tend to be more of a feature than a bug. Pre-AI, all of these things that I just mentioned would be classified as a bug. The system would get an input and would give back a different output than what was expected. Then that system, something was wrong with it, and you'd have to fix it and perfect it. But in the case of AI, these tiny things like uncertainty, opacity, and risk are baked into the system. And this is what makes it harder to trust outputs generated by AI. And we've actually made a lot of progress over the last 2 years in reducing that risk and opacity, but at its core, especially in high risk jobs like professional services or medicine, being able to reduce that risk to 0% is still the ideal case here, but we haven't gotten there yet. So how do we solve for reducing the instances where risk gets unnoticed or goes unnoticed, or wrong outputs go unnoticed because the process for going from input to output is either opaque or too complex for a human to properly oversee and track the accuracy of. Bottleneck is not performance. We've had a lot of models recently that, every new model, whether that's from Google or OpenAI or Anthropic, we've actually done really well in scaling our compute. So performance is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is really in trust. Trust is a critical factor when it comes to deploying AI systems at scale in very traditional industries like medicine or professional services. And of course, things like accounting, that actual financial systems. When we talk about trust, we talk about trust as a system property, and in four ways. One way is that trust is and that is what builds confidence in a system over time. The second thing is that the reasoning behind, one sec, the reasoning behind an output, that's the logic an AI decides to use to answer a question or to provide an output to your data, is easily understandable. One, it is easy to trace. And then when you can see it, when you can see that reasoning, it's actually easy to pass so that you can identify areas where the AI may have hallucinated or went off on a wild goose chase, and you can get the AI back on track. The third thing here is the organizational design. So we're going to talk about the social aspects of AI trust, or social aspect of trust in AI later on during the session. But the organizational design is really important. If trust fails to appear in a certain part of the ecosystem, an ecosystem could be a community, it could be a business, it could be a full-scale organization. If trust in an AI fails in one department, it tends to cross over to other departments until all trust in the system degrades over time. So you can't really compartmentalize when an AI system should perform their best and when it should perform their worst. If it performs worse at any point in time, it kind of degrades trust across the organization. And also, of course, trust is important. Trust can be built in a system by creating safe fallback paths. In UX design, these are called escape hatches. So for instance, if you want to make a destructive action, like delete your account, and you mistakenly press it, or maybe intentionally did, but having that additional confirmation logic that asks you, are you sure you want to do this? These are the risks involved. You're not going to get back your account data, etc. We are quite familiar with these instances when using digital products. But creating safe fallback paths are very essential to building trust in a system so that the user can always walk back any action that they've taken. And all of this all comes to the fact that users usually fear these four things. And we're going to use these four things to guide how we take a workflow, whether it's a traditional or physical workflow of, is organizational processes or workflows that have been carried on into an AI system. And we're going to use these four fears to identify areas for improvement in UX of that product. So the four things are invisible decision-making, unpredictable failure modes, hallucinations, and misinterpretation. And the final thing is applying the wrong rule. Right, so that's the end of the introduction. We'll be moving on to the next, our first real chapter, which is where trust breaks. In this chapter, I'm going to talk about the different areas in a customer or user journey or user flow where trust could break and how to solve for those. Trust usually collapses in three different ways or three different parts, three sections of a user path. One is the opaque transformations, that is, the system goes from A to B or input to output without showing how they got there. And this is one of the most important ways. And if you remember early in AI, when ChatGPT first launched. You ask it something and then it spit out something. And sometimes it worked, sometimes the output was obviously a hallucination you could spot. But we didn't trust it, and that happened so many times that even when we got the right answer, we couldn't really trust that this was the right answer without doing like a second or comparative analysis or research to either contradict what we first got or support it. And that was because ChatGPT at the time did not have a reasoning drawer. Right now, they do have a reasoning drawer. You can inspect the reasoning while it's reasoning. And then after the output has been generated, after your question has been answered, you can also go back to refer to a historical log of events for that reasoning session. And this was really possible because the company DeepSeek kind of created something, and I think we were one of the first to make reasoning transparent, basically transparent reasoning, and that allowed people to trust the output more. And that UX pattern got transferred to more established products like ChatGPT and Claude. The second thing here is the unexplained extremes. This is really useful in workflows by, like, especially in professional services industry, like a management consultant or an accounting consultant, and you're doing a forecasting model or you're trying to make sense of a hypothesis and doing research on the market. And you ask a simple question like, what should we expect next quarter to look like? And maybe traditional systems already give you a sense that, okay, there might be a 25% growth margin between this quarter and the next quarter. And now the AI is telling you, it's about 3,000%. Now, obviously, that degree of separation is alarming, but there's no explanation as to why or how that AI got to that answer. And I'm sure this is a very exaggerated example, but in cases like this, having explanations, and I'm going to take us back to what we just discussed about reasoning, is it allows a user to inspect and then identify areas where the AI made a mistake. And then the user can also, the human in the loop basically can nudge the AI back on track with their next query, or even just push back and say, well, this doesn't make sense. And this is why I think it doesn't make sense. But without an explanation of how they got there, users would most likely be starting from a very wild guess of what could have just happened that made AI deliver a like a failed output or a failed answer. And the third part is the single black box contamination. And this is often for multi-step workflows, like imagine an agentic workflow to take in documents outlining a disease, for instance, and also another document that describes a medical product. And you want that agentic workflow to go through these 4 documents or 3 documents and analyze the similarities, analyze the call transcripts with hospital physicians talking about this product in relation to these diseases. And then at the end of the workflow, generate a PowerPoint deck outlining what exactly is the degree of need for this product in relation to these diseases, or what is favorability depending on the criteria selected by the consulting team. Now, if the workflow goes off and runs from task 1 to task 20 and comes back with a fully formed deck without showing exactly what happened between those 20 steps, you're not going to trust what comes out at the end. Even if it looks very good, there'll be naturally you wouldn't understand how it got there, and you wouldn't be sure that this is completely accurate, and neither should you be. So having a transparent reasoning process for either short workflows or multi-step workflows is very, very, very important to reduce the anxiety that comes with how AI generates output and understands our input. People trust systems that they can explain in simple words. And I think this is the major success of this version of AI being a conversational form factor. Like most AI right now, you would interact with an AI through a chatbot. And that's because that's the most natural way for human beings to communicate with intelligence, whether it's human intelligence or in this case, artificial intelligence. And it's also the simplest way to get your thoughts out and also think through problems. Now, if humans are approaching these non-deterministic systems with a very high degree of explanations in order to in order to get best out of their AI, their working session with the AI. And the AI itself wasn't built or designed to offer that same level of openness and transparency to the user. It does undermine trust that the user has in whatever the AI chooses to output to any given query or workflow input. And to be honest, trust doesn't mean the same thing to different types of people. And it's something that we've come to learn as we continue to build Kenly in the professional services space. And of course, as we also dog food, as our teams dog food with our own product, we do use Kenly. We don't use ChatGPT. We believe Kenly is just as capable, if not more suited to our needs than off-the-shelf AI platforms. And what that has allowed us to do is to take the perspectives of different types of users on our platform. For instance, for analysts using our platform, they need transparency into methodology and data. So whenever they ask queries or they run workflows that involve quant, our system is able to identify where all of these data are being pulled from. And the user can in the moment, go through each cited resource, go to the exact page in that document and confirm that what the AI just gave it, the sentences that it wrote to analyze XYZ or to summarize XYZ, is backed by historical data from the consulting firm. For managers, stability and predictability as they plan, like engagement managers, how they plan fulfillment for client projects, allowing them to plan these engagement properly through Kenly to draft proposal decks and know what teams are available or what partners or analysts or associates on the team are available for this new work based on what kind of work they've done in the past for the company. Kenly can provide all of that information and link them directly to actual contributions that these individuals have made to previous projects that are similar to this new impending or potential project. And of course, executives and engineers have different needs as well. Executives demand control and oversight, and so they know exactly what everyone is doing, what workflows have been deployed, what kind of data have been ingested into the system, and who has access to what. And for engineers, if there are errors or issues with the system, our engineers can easily repro these issues because the system is built by default to be transparent with all the logs on all the sessions across all the users that have used the platform. So this is what trust means to these different types of people. Now, well, here where we're talking about social trust, and this is very important when building for enterprise because usually the people who buy enterprise products are not the end users. They're usually the ones that are in charge of purchasing enterprise tooling for the teams. And so these managers are in charge of this, or these directors or partners are in charge of these things. They do take some level of consensus from the widespread experiences that their subordinates or team members are having with this new tool to basically determine or inform how resources will be allocated to these tools or a different tool next year or next quarter. So trust is very social when it comes to enterprise, AI especially. And people judge AI not just by their own experiences, they do judge AI or their AI tools based on the experience of other people, whether in their teams or across other teams. I'll give you a very good example. A recent pilot we did with a UK consulting firm. It's actually spread between the UK and the US. And the pilot started off, about 20, 30 people from the company joined the pilot. And because of their use of the product and how well they talked about our product, by the end of the pilot, about 6 weeks later, that number had grown to some 120 people. That's about 4 times increase just because the trust and word of mouth spread across the company and more people wanted to be more efficient and more effective at their jobs. So they convinced their managers to let them in on the pilot. We eventually closed the account and fully deployed to about 500 person consulting firm. But it was mostly because we did take this very seriously, that trust isn't just compartmentalized by this person had a great experience one time or this other person had a great experience the other time. It has to be great all round. And even when it's not great, it's easily identifiable and it's easy to troubleshoot what's wrong on the user side. So the user doesn't just feel like, oh, it's my fault that the system is doing the wrong thing. Usually it's just AI being as non-deterministic as it can. It's because compute power isn't as available as it is right now. So giving the user these fallback options and of course the ability to retry with more intelligent reasoning models and also making those reasoning patterns transparent for the user to debug is very super important. And it's a kind of difficult to do all of these things while reducing the cognitive load of showing the user all the options that they can have. So there is a sort of art to it, as well as a lot of technology behind it. Trust gap is a very good way to, at a glance, see what trust looks like for users and where it matters most. Users, from what we've discussed so far, we've learned that users need understandable UI that explains its reasoning in plain language, not in code, or not at all. Users also think that trust matters the most because clarity is more valuable than raw model performance. Right now, model performance is table stakes. ChatGPT released an open source model, USS, 2 models actually, and for free, you could get the same compute power and same intelligence as GPT 4.1. And that was really smart even before 5 came out. And there are other models. So model performance is table stakes, is what we've seen so far. Clarity, trust, defensibility, cited resources. These are very, very important in building a real connection between the actual performance of the AI and real world use cases in business. The path forward, we will need to design trust as a core system property, not as an afterthought. And I think that's why this conversation is really important to have as often as possible. Designing for trust, what does that look like? Right, so trust, designing for trust, a good way to look at designing for trust would be through the lenses of these 5 checkpoints. I'll be going through each of them very quickly because it's kind of, right, we still have time. So 5 of them, so there's inputs, there's reasoning, there's decisions, there's errors, and there's feedback. We'll get into them shortly. Checkpoint 1, inputs must be clear. People can't trust outputs if they don't know what data went in. And this isn't very easy to do all the time. And sometimes the best way to ensure that the user is aware of the input is at the point of retrieval. This is not really a very technical conversation, but basically RAG works in a way that, you ingest a lot of data into your LLM and it creates a kind of graph where the LLM understands where to go to when asked a certain question. It's kind of like a retrieval system. It's basically in the name. So when the user asks an AI a question, what the user is doing at that point is retrieving information. And most times commonly in many AI systems, even ChatGPT on the default model, when you ask the question, if it gives you an answer, but it doesn't tell you where it got that answer from. If you maybe select search the web, or if you're on the plus plan and you choose the higher models like thinking, it would think for some time to get you the answers. And that's when it would show you its reasoning model. And then when the answers come in, it shows you the sources at the end of the answer. But even that isn't it's great because user knows where the information comes from, but it not being the default is a telling sign of what seems to be the priority for most AI systems. And honestly, for the most case, for consumer tooling, it probably isn't as important, at least for now. It's not part of the discourse that input clarity is that important for consumer tooling. But when it comes to enterprise tooling, it's very different conversation. It's where the difference between making the wrong recommendation to a client and the right one is in getting the data from the right sources within the company's institutional data, institutional knowledge. So the retriever, the user making that request of the AI needs to understand or needs to know upfront where this data is coming from. So instead of not showing it at all, instead of even, rather than even showing the reasoning and showing the sources, but keeping the sources and reasoning like at the end of the answer, it's very important that you intersperse the cited sources per sentence retrieved. And I'll show you what I mean very quickly. Let's see. Share something else. All right, so these are some designs, of course, of the live product. Cannot show the live product because it's non-disclosure material, but I could show this. What I'm saying is this. So this is what you'd expect from a common chatbot AI tool. You ask the question, it pulls out the answer and just gives it to you as is. Now, for our type of user, a consulting professional, or anybody working in professional services space who is relying on internal data to influence any decisions they're making or recommendations they're making to clients, or any deliverables like proposal decks or any other type of deliverable decks, memos, and such. It's important that the user knows where this sentence is being pulled from. So please take a look at this version and then take a look at this version that says this answer contains both internal and external sources. So it tells you that some of this information here has been pulled from your company's information, but some of it has also been pulled from a web search or ResearchGate search. And it's all part of this answer. Please take a look at it and confirm your citations. And for each sentence or paragraph in this case, there is a citation stop that tells you what document this paragraph or sentence has been pulled from and how many other resources or documents are being referenced here. And if you click on one of these citations, you can open that document to the exact page, right? You can open that document to the exact page where that sentence has been pulled from, or that information, that data has been pulled from. And you can also scan other pages in the document or just scan through other citations. You can see more information about the document, like who contributed to the document, who worked on the project, what was the project about, what year the project started, or what date or time the project started and when it ended, and is this an approved credential or not, and so on and so forth. So it's an information-rich clarity engine, basically. So you're not just getting an answer from the AI system. The AI system is also telling you where these answers are coming from, what inputs it's used to create or to answer your questions. Okay, let me share. Let's go back to our presentation. Okay. Checkpoint 2, reasoning must be feasible. So if you've used ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, as at last year, I think this is when the reasoning drawer came out just after DeepSeek did its thing. You would have, right now, when on like reasoning mode, depending on what AI model, AI tool you're using for ChatGPT, it's I think it's GPT-5 thinking. It would show you exactly what it's thinking, but technically it's not really showing you that because from the technical papers, ChatGPT isn't front-loading that information. It's still very proprietary for them to do. So what they are doing or what you're seeing is the GPT or the AI is basically generating its own thought patterns, but not necessarily taking those thought patterns, but it's trying to generate a very similar version of its thought patterns in clear text for a user to scan and understand that, okay, the AI understood my request and is doing the right things or taking the right steps to come back with a very good answer. And while not perfect, it's a very good example of making reasoning visible. And that's checkpoint 2. I could switch back to Figma to show you what that looks like for Henley, but let's move on. I'm going to share this document with the DSC team. Checkpoint 3, decision boundaries must be obvious. So what are decision boundaries? Decision boundaries are when an AI has done certain things in response to your request or your workflow instructions, but it needs more information from you to be able to proceed. And that information could perform a number of different functions, one of them being that it basically reduces the randomness factor of what the AI is trying to do. So if it feels like the randomness, it's getting into very random waters, it's going to ask you for confirmation, like these are the things I found, but if you want me to do X.1 or X.2, even Y.1, please let me know, or you could share so-and-so document. So there's no ambiguity at all as to what just happened. You understand that the AI has done its best up until this point, but now it requires something more, a go ahead from the human. And that puts a lot of power back into the user to say, okay, I don't need that anymore. This is actually great. Or, of course, I need this, and here's a document to help you do it. And user uploads the file, and the AI is happy, and the randomness factor has reduced, and it knows exactly what to do. So being able to offer that button back to the user is crucial. And it can come in a number of ways. It can come by AI making a suggestion, which we just described, which we just described as scenario. But also be auto-applied. That is when building your agentic workflow, in the beginning of that workflow, you say, if you find documents on autoimmune disorders or on due diligence reports in the automobile industry, please look for the data sheets or data look for the data sheet that correspond with, and then you put in the data that you're looking for, and it's going to do that. Now, when the AI has gone through the previous steps or tasks, and it gets to that point, because you've already told it what to do in the beginning, it knows exactly what it needs to do. If it had gotten to that point and required to look for data sheets for due diligence reports in the automobile industry, because that has already been set at the beginning of the workflow. A different scenario is when this requires a human to actually come in and hold the reins. And a very good, very accessible example is agent mode in ChatGPT, where you tell ChatGPT, please go on Ryanair and book me a flight. Now, ChatGPT would go on Ryanair, right? And it creates this browser portal in your chat interface, and you see it kind of clicking around and searching for flights from Chicago to Houston. But now it's already reserved the flight and filled in your details, but it needs to pay. Now, ChatGPT can't do that yet, but it requires you to come in and actually put in your card details, or if you have a saved card, select the card you want and actually hit send. But all the previous steps had already been taken by the AI. But now the AI needs you, the human, to come in more complex, high stakes decision points and take that step. So decision boundaries need to be obvious. It needs to happen where it needs to happen. And when it does happen, it has to explain exactly what is happening, and nothing more, nothing less. Ambiguity is the worst friend for trust in AI systems, because AI are inherently ambiguous, very non-deterministic systems. So you need to reduce that ambiguity through communication or through how the systems are designed when it comes to the human-computer interaction. Checkpoint 4, errors must feel safe. Hidden errors destroy trust, while visible errors build trust. Usually it's very attractive to hide when an error has been made, because you're trying to build trust in the system, and the system doesn't make any errors. But when it comes to AI, errors are inherently a thing. They do happen. The bulk of the work is to reduce the frequency of errors, or the level of catastrophe errors can bring, but it shouldn't be to completely erase them. Instead, the goal should be to make errors visible so that a human being working with the AI can come in and fix the error, or escalate the error if it's something that can't be fixed on their end. And it's one thing and a very terrible thing for a search to fail, and the user doesn't know that the search just failed. Instead, the user gets 3 sentences, even though they were expecting 20 sentences based on their user query. And there's no error banner, no escape hatch, no fallback, no escalation button like to leave feedback or to report this issue or flag an issue. When that happens, the user feels less secure and trust falls. Trust gets eroded by these actions. So the strategy is to make errors safe, and to make them safe, you need to make them visible and then make them escapable, for lack of a better word. There has to be something that the user can do to navigate beyond that error. These are the recovery patterns. Trust is built by how systems fix mistakes. If the user can see a system fix its own mistake when it's been escalated or nudged to do so, then it builds trust. First step is to admit the error, right? If, for instance, ChatGPT lies to you that, oh, you could put salt in, I don't know, could put salt in a cup of coffee, right? And that's an obvious error. not a good example because usually errors are very subtle and more annoying than that. But ChatGPT, because of how it's been built, most LLMs anyway, it's true reinforced learning, RLHF. They want to please the human in the loop. They want to be known or seen to do the right things. So it's going to take shortcuts in order to do that. With that understanding, there has to be a healthy amount of distrust between the user and the system for any kind of meaningful, safe work to happen. That is the paradigm we live in today. So the point isn't to hide the error when it happens, is to bring it up. So if the user pushes back and says, no, ChatGPT, I know salt isn't right for coffee, or depending on how refined your taste buds are, and ChatGPT would say, oh, I'm sorry, that is clearly an error. I made a mistake. If ChatGPT doubled down and said, no, you definitely put salt in your coffee, and this is just a wild example, but try to expand it into any other sort of professional scenario. If ChatGPT does that, it's more likely that the user wouldn't feel trusting of the system anymore. That trust that had been built up to that point will start to erode because why is the AI clearly lying to me? So it's good to admit the error, then explain why. So it could be, oh, I couldn't find this and instead I did this. One time I uploaded a document to ChatGPT and it gave me like a wrong answer, and I asked it, why did you give me that answer? And it admitted that, oh, it's because I did not actually read the document you uploaded before answering. So you need to explain why, and then you need to offer a fix. And usually that fix is just rerunning the query or just adding more information or context for the AI to understand. Now, preventing reoccurrence is something that has to happen from the technical side, where maybe you escalate the situation, you leave feedback, or you report an error, and the technical team in the background goes in, remember what we said about being able to audit the logs and repro an issue. They repro it, identify why that went wrong, and they fix it so it doesn't happen the next time. Doing these four things, and this is a very chaotic, oftentimes rewarding experience of fine-tuning the base AI systems that run our AI tools in the workplace. Checkpoint 5. Feedback must close the loop. What that means really is that an error isn't really logged until someone pays attention to it. And early on in the company's life, it's very easy since the team is small to, if the systems aren't really there, a lot of these issues kind of slip through the cracks. With an increase in team size and of course proper triaging strategies put in place, like watching user sessions, taking notes, creating an urgent burn down column in Linear to track like recent catastrophic issues and fix them within 24 hours. If those strategies are not there, it's very common for things to slip through the cracks. But what's even more common is an error happens and the user either doesn't have access to or any affordance to report the issue or describe what that issue meant to them for more context to the customer success team, or they do have that affordance, but they don't use it. They're not encouraged to use it. And this is one of the ways adoption programs in enterprise companies fail when it comes to deploying AI systems at scale. At least that's what we've learned. So making the process of leaving feedback or reporting issues very obvious and encouraged within pilot programs or full deployment cycles is super important. An error it doesn't stand a chance to be fixed, and trust doesn't grow because the same errors repeat themselves over time. So this is an example workflow for an AI system, right? And a human being working together. There's the input, there's the processing of that input, and it's passed on to the model. And the model makes its recommendation. And sometimes the human needs to come in and check that recommendation. And then the human outlines what the action should be, and then so on and so on and so forth. So that is the constant back and forth between a human and an AI in today's workforce. This is what has happened in the last 3 years in the evolution of work globally. The different ways to measure trust. One of my very fun ways is through analytics dashboards to track. Anytime you build an AI system or you build a new feature, it's very important to add tags to them. So usability tags, so you can track how things are being used and what they mean. There isn't a hard, fast way to do this. It really just comes down to what you're trying to track and what you're trying to improve in your team and with your product. But some of the tools that I would recommend include Post-Hog, because it allows you to create these tags in the system. And whenever a user clicks a button or chooses it makes a decision, it kind of tracks to certain hypotheses that your team has created. And sometimes it contradicts those hypotheses, and other times it supports it, and you have the chance to buttress in the right direction, like buttress your actions in moving in the right directions. This is something that is important, especially for high quant workflows, being able to identify when an output from an AI is high confidence and low confidence. Early on in Kelly's existence, we built a data sheet tool, like a research tool that basically lives in a spreadsheet or on a table. We called it answer grade sheets. And what that did was you give it a simple prompt and it will automatically spin out different columns with different questions. And whatever rows you add to that table, it would run fresh answers for all those rows. Like a good, let me paint a scenario for you. You want to find out the different investors investing in San Francisco for EV electronic vehicles, right? And then you ask it, please find me investors in SF and how many people they've invested in, what their websites are. These are different questions that kind of sit on different columns. And then as you add more investment firms, more VC firms to the rows, all those questions get answered. Like you don't need to run individual queries for them since you've already set up a table. And what that did was it would go into the web and other APIs that we'd integrated into the system and pull information very quickly. But sometimes those information weren't high confidence, sometimes they were low confidence, and initially there wasn't any way for the user to know which one was high confidence and which one wasn't. And that's kind of crucial when you are a customer or a user using a tool like that to verify the temperature of leads, how hot or warm a lead is. And so we introduced this confidence scoring mechanism into the system, and that generated more trust for the types of results that we give the users. At this point, let's take some time to think about your workflow, whatever kind of work you do in your day-to-day and in your 9 to 5, and which step is, I need to think of which step is the least understood and what you need to do to start improving trust there. Right, so moving on to the next section, and I think this should be the second to the last one. Making AI understandable. Right, so making AI understandable basically refers to, first of all, this type of phrase or statement, it grounds us very quickly into the why of it. And why isn't in making better AI. It's in taking the perspectives of our end users. Perspective of our end users, at least at Kenley, they're not very technical. They're highly smart people working in consulting, strategy and management consulting for sometimes decades. So they have built a strong sense of pattern matching. It's kind of why they exist and why they are good at their jobs. But can they write a data, build a data model or build a website to understand the intricacies of statistical models behind LLMs? Probably not. But most of the time, all of that information is not that useful anyway. But ones that are useful, especially when it comes to doing the work that they want to do every day, anytime they interact with AI, these workflows that they carry out every day at work, making those aspects of those interactions that were previously opaque, making them transparent and easy to understand is supremely crucial for the type of users that we're working with. If you're working with AI engineers, then maybe your product doesn't need to be understandable, just clear. And I guess that's the end goal of this conversation and this session we're having, is bringing clarity as much as possible to AI workflows that involve AI. And clarity, the end goal of bringing all of that clarity into these workflows is to build trust. And sometimes clarity and trust mean different things to different types of people. And so we need to talk about making AI understandable. It's a very subjective thing. Users only need the essential factors. Of course, you need to identify what those essential factors are. Especially because there's always been a key, one of these hardest problems to solve in UX design or product strategy is cognitive overload. How much is too much? How much information is too much, and how much of it is just the right amount to get the user to the next step in the process? Recently, I wrote, I think it was a year ago, I wrote an article called Zero Trust UX, and it just outlines what UX means when it comes to very high stakes environments like enterprise or fintech, and why it was important to know what market you are playing in, because of course you want to bring in the most stringent security practices. Let's say you're working in fintech and it's a consumer product, but you also don't want to create so much friction between the user and the product and the actions they want to take that they lose interest and never come back. Your retention drops, your product isn't sticky. You want just the right balance of security and friction. You don't want too much friction because of too much security, but you don't want too little security because of too little friction. So you just need the right amount. And that's kind of learning we are discussing here, that in this case of making AI understandable, we always need to identify what the essential things are and then surface that at the right time. So for example, if something fails, you can say, oh, file is missing in project X, instead of we couldn't find this page of this file in this project because of this SharePoint or Google Drive integration, and it's just so much information. For an engineer, all of that makes sense and is useful if you want to debug an issue. But for an end user that just wants to write a deck outline, that's not that important. They just need to know that, oh, this is missing, this is incorrect here because this file that I need to reference it is missing. Could you upload that file? And the user can quickly upload the file and get on with their day. Auditability and traceability, always coming back to this, and it's super important. The AI system you're building needs to provide three things: what was done, which data was used, and when it happened. For engineers or engagement managers or just generally adoption directors. This is important, especially when there's been an issue and even sometimes when things go well. Because sometimes in testing, when building new agentic workflows, you spend a lot of time testing that your prompt works the way it should work, and that it works consistently the way it should work under the same scenarios. And sometimes you run so many tests, and then maybe one or two work, and you need to know what actually worked, which data it used to make it work, and when it happened. So you could go and retrieve that state, that stored state of the workflow configuration, so you can deploy it across the firm. So even when things go well and when things go bad, you need the same things and you need to be able to surface them when needed. Avoid cognitive overload. Too much as it will overwhelm users. Too little explains nothing and users get confused, which is the same thing as overwhelm. And just right is exactly where we need to be, where there's a progressive disclosure of information when requested or when absolutely needed. And in identifying when those trigger points, where those trigger points are, is also the team's responsibility. So showing citations for every answer an AI creates is important, whether the user asks for it or not. Like, the system needs to understand that as a default state of its output, or as a default state of whatever it is that it's trying to output to the user, that a response cannot be trusted, especially in an enterprise, environment, without an actual traceable connection that is defensible to an existing and a real existing document somewhere in the company's institutional knowledge banks, whether it's in SharePoint or Google Drive or wherever. And the user can go directly to that file, whether in-app or in the actual data storage. Some people use on-prem storage, that's fine, to review and cross-check and then confirm that this answer is actually correct. So these are two examples where we're showing a risk score of 7.2, and then on the right, we're showing, oh, the risk score is 7.2, but this is why, this is what happened. And this is the other thing that caused it. And this is when it happened. This gives us more to trust in this score than simply just showing the score. And if we added a lot more information, like 5 bullet points per category here, the user is just going to get lost or just going to completely ignore it. And that isn't useful at all. And finally, balancing automation and human oversight. Automation should evolve alongside user trust. And this is a very important conversation, because usually we would try to automate things very quickly because we think that's efficient, but usually it's important to try things out, especially again with non-deterministic systems, with LLMs. It's very important to try things out, and we've seen that that's how users tend to do things, because they are not really sure what AI can and can't do. And honestly, sometimes it feels like the full breadth or the full scope of AI's capability is endless. So we've often seen that users will try little things in chat, like regular chat, and then maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, they realize that, oh, I could combine these different things into an end-to-end workflow and then actually automate it. And that's when they can trust the workflow builder within the product to automate different aspects of their day-to-day work. So automation should evolve with user trust. And so what that means is, if your end goal is to ensure more people use automation, use your platform for automation, it has to start from like sandboxes, testing, just natural organic use of the product itself in a very scientific method-like manner before the user can eventually progress to fully automating those things, because they've indeed learned the best practices on how to prompt this particular AI to get what they want or need consistently. When to involve humans. Yeah, this is important. Ambiguous situations, definitely. When data is incomplete, the system should report back to a human and say, I know you asked for this, but these are the only things I could get. And the human needs to know why they only got those things. If the reason is because data is incomplete or data is corrupted, the user is the only one that can highlight or escalate to support or customer success to get it fixed. Or the user can, in the heat of the moment, just decide to find the documents themselves and upload it and continue their work. High impact decisions like financial commitments, checking out a cart, or personnel changes like making a new hire or making a new hiring recommendation or strategic pivots that require any sort of human judgment. These are the points where humans still need to hold the reins. AI can help to kind of nibble around the inefficient parts of the workflow, but in the high stakes parts of it, humans still need to be involved, at least for now anyway. Risk-based routing, design systems need to automatically escalate high-risk tasks whilst handling routine cases autonomously. A very good example is we just built a feature into Kenly workflows called breakpoints. What that means is a user can create a workflow and then specify what aspects of that workflow need a breakpoint. And for another user making use of that workflow, what that looks like is that when they run the workflow does task 1, task 2, shows the output for each of those tasks. When it gets to task 4, that maybe shows task 4 is for preparing a company memo for context and objectives for a new client project. The breakpoint there basically says, before proceeding, please could you review the output for context and objectives. So the human here needs to go in there and review it because this is very important. It's a very important step. If the content here is wrong, it's going to affect all the subsequent steps. And then that's just lost time. And if that problem isn't even identified by the user or made transparently obvious by the AI system, that deck or whatever deliverable it is will end up in a company meeting or a board meeting, and it's just a terrible look. So high risk situations require human in the loop. And yes, risk controls will also strengthen trust. And these rituals are more for the people building the tech and the people using the tech. People building the tech do the weekly reviews, monthly audits, and then in collaboration with the people using the tech, create strategies to align properly every quarter or every year to identify and consistently deploy good AI practices. One of the things not usually talked about is designing for control. Users need to feel like the final decisions are theirs, and especially in high risk situations or high stakes situations, it's important that the user makes final call. So an AI can create a cart on Amazon, but the user needs to action the checkout. An AI can prepare a deck outline and content for a deck, but the user needs to review that content and then action the create deck. And even if the creation of the deck is automatically triggered after the content outline has been created, the user always should have an escape hatch to delete certain things from the deck or to directly manually edit the deck on platform or anywhere, or if it's a downloadable artifact, you can download the PowerPoint file, go into your PowerPoint tool and make edits to it. It should never be catastrophic that the user can never walk away from the decision an AI takes. And scaling trust is all about the shared components, warning patterns, handoff protocols within AI teams building AI, and of course, in how those AI teams interface with the end users or other relevant stakeholders. And the reason why we kept talking about transparency on this call is there's something called the transparency debt. Just as technical debt, products eventually accumulate transparency debt, and they are usually as hard to identify as technical debt. At least for technical debt, you can maybe create a bunch of linear tickets that can always stay in backlog, and when the team grows in capacity, the new engineering members can go in there and fix the technical debt. But for transparency debt, there's things like outdated tooltips, unclear messages, inconsistent explanations that mean nothing to the user. So the user never fully trusts the system, never escalates the situation, never leaves feedback. And all of that is kind of like pulled away from the AI teams that are actually building tech. And eventually that erodes trust across the company and leads to subscription cancellations or licenses withdrawals between client customer firms and the enterprise AI teams building them. Right, so a few other things for scaling trust, very administrative things like documentation and onboarding. A very important part of onboarding hundreds of people at a time for one customer firm is creating guides and actual examples and training sessions that sometimes have lasted weeks, if not close to 2 months, because of the sheer size of the team or the teams that are being onboarded to the platform. But without that upfront investment in teaching what the tools can and can't do, because it's not just about UX. Like anyone can know what a button looks like and what a tooltip looks like, but not understanding why and how systems create answers for you, it leaves a lot of room for users that don't understand or know what to do with an error tag or an info tip. And so they don't escalate an issue or they don't make the best use of the AI tool in the first place. The documentation, onboarding practices are super important for adoption programs. The trust onboarding, you have to do certain things. You have, for example, you need a safe sandbox mode to try anything you want without consequences. And of course, you can create chats. Let's say it's a conversational chatbot. You can create chats and you can delete those chats. They don't mean anything. Or you can keep them or create projects and store certain tasks or certain chats in those projects defined by what types of workflows or what projects, what firm projects you're working on. Also a guided example, which could be a complete workflow or could be a number or library of videos that a user can watch to learn exactly what AI looks like in action. And of course, reversal paths are important. That is undo options. If I make an edit to a PowerPoint or a deck in the app, I can always, Control Z to undo. I can, if I upload certain documents in chat and I'm telling AI, these are the instructions I need you to carry out. And I realize while the AI is reasoning that I made a mistake, there should always be a stop button. So the user doesn't have to wait 5 minutes just to be able to retry. So there should be a stop button. That's a very clear reversal path. And there are other types of reversal paths as well. Clear expectations are important. So there should be realistic boundaries upfront. When starting a workflow that has, say, 5 breakpoints, a user should know ahead of time that they should anticipate some breakpoints along the way that would require them to step in and take certain actions. And if they do choose, we should also afford them to auto resume at any breakpoint, which means that for any subsequent breakpoints, the user agrees that they are totally fine with any output. The system can just carry on as is. But yeah, trust is a long-term thing. Aside from the very tactical things we've discussed, and of course the whys and the hows we've discussed, there's also the long-term behavioral or cultural change that needs to happen within companies that build AI and the companies that use AI. So things that we need to adopt and then track rigorously. Earlier I discussed post-hoc and other similar usability tracking tools like Maze and I've forgotten the others, but Maze and post-hoc are really good. Every time a new feature is shipped, a tag should be attached to that feature so that usability can be tracked and errors can be identified and improvements can be made very quickly. Trust in AI systems cannot be the responsibility of a single team. It cannot even be the responsibility of the company building the tool. It's a huge responsibility that needs to be shared with everybody involved in the ecosystem. Like I said in the beginning, as part of the 4 quadrants of trust as a system property, organizational design as it relates to the ecosystem, using and building the AI is super important. Measurable impact is also important. It always has to be measurable impact as to why or what happened after AI was adopted at the firm. That creates a North Star dynamic where there has to be a reason for using AI. So if AI is to increase, if the goal is to increase or reduce the time to first deck for a new client, that needs to be trackable. If the goal is to reduce errors in judgments or in decisions by, building traceability and auditability into how information is retrieved by the AI system, that also needs to be trackable. So measurable impact builds long-term trust, or at least influences decisions that would lead to long-term trust. Right, we've gotten to the end of the conversation. Really happy to have been here. And so the key takeaways I hope that we can all go home with these 4 things: that we strive to build clarity, we communicate logic as possible and as essentially without overcrowding or creating cognitive overload, to set boundaries and be honest about capabilities and limitations, and of course to design for correction, escape hatches, reversal paths, undo actions to enable users to fix mistakes and provide feedback. So I hope this call has been insightful. This workshop has been insightful. I hope we can all go home and try this one exercise where we select one workflow. This could be an agentic workflow, but ideally it should be a workflow that represents how you currently do a specific part of your job. And then identify one opaque step on how you currently do a specific type of part of your job with AI. Identify one opaque step with the tools you're currently using and how you would resolve that step using any of the trust patterns that we have discussed today. I hope that you see firsthand how transparency changes user behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb, for the great presentation. Considering we have a little more time, I would like to move on to questions from the audience, if there are any. And or you can add something that you want to.
Okay. Right. So let me share something I wanted to share earlier about showing reasoning models, or making reasoning transparent. So here, this is an example of what the reasoning model in Kenley looks like, where once you ask a question, it tells you how long it's thinking for. and then what actions it's actually taking. So maybe you uploaded an RFP and it's telling you, oh, I'm reading the uploaded RFP at the moment, please wait. And then it's telling you other actions it's currently taking, like searching internal documents, and it's showing you what documents it's searching for, what meta prompts it's created to find more relevant information. And if it's searching externally, it's also telling you that as well. And eventually gets to a concise answer, well formatted and defensible due to the easily traceable citations here, and a banner that tells you where that information has been pulled from, if it's internal and external. Some customers, some companies do care more about the internal documents because they've taken so much time in building that internal expertise and benchmarks. So they usually prefer answers coming from internal. Some other companies care more for external content than internal. And most of them actually do just care about the combination of here's what we know, here's what the external trends look like, and here's a synthesis of those blocks of information. And you can click on any citation to open it up, like I showed earlier, and see it. So I hope this kind of gives an insight to what I've meant by building trust into AI systems by these little actions or considerations on behalf of the user, because the user doesn't really care about how the AI even works. They just care about how accurate it is, because believe it or not, everyone has had an experience with AI where there's been an obvious error, and there's been an obvious error very often. So there is a healthy sense of distrust between a user and AI, especially in a professional context. So being able to be transparent about that and create those actions or those escape hatches to resolve those errors is super crucial, rather than hiding when those errors happen. That's it for me. Any questions?
Anyone can raise their hands or they can type the question into the chat. Okay, if there are no questions, I would like to thank you again, Caleb, for this awesome presentation.
Yeah.
I'm sure it helped everyone who listened.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's
Yeah.
been a great one.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
We will now take a break until 1:30 p.m. and then we will continue the program. Thank you.